Good afternoon, everyone. Today on the shores of Persian Gulf, we are joined by two wonderful guests, Shafquat, Rabbee, Anik, and Hasan Mahmud, Dr. Hasan Mahmud. Shafquat Rabbee is traveling from Bangladesh to the United States, and he is transiting through Doha. So we are very pleased to have him with us, and it's also nice to have Dr. Hasan Mahmud talk to us. He's the author of Bangali Musulman Prashno. Shafquat Rabbee. So, how was your experience in Bangladesh? You were just telling me that you haven't been in Bangladesh for past 15 years. So, how did it feel?
So this was fantastic. I haven't been to the country for more than 14 years. I went there right after the despot of Bengal, Sheikh Hasina, was overthrown by a popular uprising. I just went there to see how it feels to be in that country after so many years, and how it feels to see these people enjoy their newfound freedom, which they're already calling Liberation 2.0, the second liberation of Bangladesh. It was ecstatic, even though I reached the country on August 16th, which is about 11 days from the day when Sheikh Hasina had to flee the country. So it was still 11 days away from the heat of the moment, but it was still amazing because the streets were full of graffitis and pictures of people drawing all their sufferings and the glory of this Liberation 2.0. Like the walls are full of beautiful graffitis, not just in Dhaka, it is also in I went to Nilphamari, which is 300 kilometers from Dhaka. Even there I found graffitis all over. So it truly felt like a liberating moment. Throughout these last 5 days, I was there for a very short trip. Throughout these 5-6 days, I spoke with a lot of people. And one of the things that was amazing, which is somewhat weird too, is that it felt like a crime scene investigation. Meaning I was talking to people and everybody has a story to tell about theft, plunder, attempted rape, disappearance, things like that. Like all the people were saying some weird stories that they knew about the fallen regime.
Just for the sake of clarification, the stories that you have been hearing, were they about the period after the fall of Hasina?
No, of course not.
Yep.
Of course not. So it felt like crime scene investigation means the crime has been done, the crime is over, and you are there looking at the crime scene, trying to figure out who's the criminal and what they did.
Yep.
So that's what it felt like. So let's say I talk to a banker, and then the banker tells me, okay, let me tell you this story, how they stole this money. You talk to a doctor, they say, okay, let me tell you how this was done in this hospital. You talk to a media person, a female media person, and she opens up, says, let me tell you how they used to manipulate women. So it's just like a crime scene investigation. Everybody has a criminal story to share.
Okay. So, Dr. Hasan Mahmud, Shafquat Rabbee Anik has been telling us about the euphoric state that exists in contemporary Bangladesh after Hasina's fall. But in foreign press and also in our interaction with people who are not familiar with the scenario in Bangladesh, and a segment of Bangladeshi population, if we may, we can call them the upper middle class section. So they're worried that the things will be more of the same. So both who are coming to power and the outgoing party, both represent the same mentality, same attitude, and both are corrupt. So there has been an attempt to draw an equivalence between the outgoing party and what we can say the incoming party. So how do you respond to that claim?
Thank you for having me in these discussions. So and also welcome Anik bhai in Doha. We are really excited to have you here and learn from your experience in past 5 days being in Bangladesh. I also have been traveling outside of Bangladesh since 2006, but I on and off I go there every other year. For me, this also feels like unreal. Like this, I mean, I cannot even process properly what had just happened over there in Bangladesh on 5th of August. Now come to the question you raised, that most people who do not have direct interaction or direct experience of living in Bangladesh, believing that there is no proper alternative to the past regime. The alternatives that we have at hand now are more or less same as the fallen regime. That in reality, of course, that's not true. But why do people believe in such a false equivalence? I think the one of the factor that contributes to this false consciousness about believing that BNP or any other possible alternative would be similar like the Awami League in terms of going against democracy, in terms of corruption and everything that we now see the past regime had been doing by far. And one of the reason for that also because also the absence of like fact-based narratives about Bangladesh in international media, particularly in English language media. We can pinpoint the actors or agents who are mostly producing that narrative about Bangladesh for international audience, and most likely we would be able to see how those people are either not based in Bangladesh or have an interest in promoting that kind of like unreal narrative. One way to solve this, one way to deal with this problem is to encourage more like increasing number of authors, writers, journalists, and public opinion influencers to visit Bangladesh, to see Bangladesh reality in Bangladesh with an open mind and understand what it actually is out there, and then report faithfully.
But what you have been saying is about how this narrative is being constructed. But let's say, for whatever reason, including yours, this narrative is constructed. But how do you deconstruct it? What's the counter argument that we can make? And I would invite both Shafquat, Rabbee, Anik, and you to respond to this.
Let me snatch the floor a little bit here. This whole moral equivalency, or even supposedly an objective equivalency that Awami League and BNP are the same, this is not factually defendable, right? Because BNP was in power in Bangladesh multiple times, including Ziaur Rahman's times and Khaleda Zia's time. Sheikh Hasina was in power multiple times, including her father's time, if you, Awami League in that sense, or if you just confine to Sheikh Hasina herself, there is a 1996 Sheikh Hasina, there is a 2008 Sheikh Hasina, 2013 Sheikh Hasina, 2018 Sheikh Hasina, and 2023 Sheikh Hasina, right? There are multiple versions of these regimes. The point here is that if you look at the death statistics, like how many people died, how much money was plundered, how much, how many human right violations were documented by independent third parties, like let's say Amnesty International, HRW, you create a framework, like an objective framework. Just make a simple little framework with human rights and theft and plunder and killing. Do a comparison. This last regime of Sheikh Hasina, I'm not even talking about the last 16 years. If you just take last maybe 16 days before her departure, it would dwarf almost any other regime ever, because she actually had to leave the country, flee the country after killing about 1,000 students. In the history of Bangladesh, which has been quite bloody, going back to all the way to 1950s. 1952, 7 people killed for the language movement. Throughout the 1960s, the so-called Shona Jhora 1960, golden, I don't know what that translates into, but Shona Jhora means it's the glorious 1960s of Andolan. Not more than 15 people were killed. Let's remove 71 because that was not a movement, that was a war, and it was a third party who were killing us. So let's remove that time. but then come back to within Bangladesh political violence, Ershad era, not more than 20. You will be stretching if you try to find 20 dead bodies during Ershad's era. Khaleda Zia's era, Hasina's others era, nothing will compare 1,000 shot dead. So it's a total absurdity because Hasina's last, as I said, not even 16 years, just count 16 days of depravity does not equate if you take killing as a statistics. Now let's go to theft and plunder. $10 billion a year, $150 billion after 15 years. That's the number that international community, independent third parties have said. And we all know that because the banking numbers are just like that. $15 billion per year, $10 billion per year, 150 over 15 years. This kind of amount is like through the roof if you think about Tariq Rahman's corruption, like $5 million Siemens bribery, another $400,000 in a US cable.
Just a second. Are these allegations or have they been confirmed?
Let's, for argument's sake, accept every allegation is true.
Okay.
Let's say. Let's just accept all allegations ever being true.
Okay.
Okay?
We're raising the bar.
Raise the bar. Make Tariq Rahman or BNP the criminals. Okay?
Okay.
So it's $5 million of Siemens, few $100,000 of this US embassy cable that we saw, 2 crore taka of orphanage trust that apparently Khaleda Zia never released. Whatever, just add up as many accusations as you can find. And then just compare that against Sheikh Hasina's driver or whatever that guy was.
Yep.
Like who had like... So I already proved you killing. I already proved you plunder. What else are you comparing here? Like what else can you even compare? So this moral equivalency, this statistical equivalency that Awami League people or the so-called, like the civil society people keep bringing, that these two parties are the same. It is preposterously different. It is not defendable, like in any quantifiable measurement.
Okay. So Shafquat Rabbee has been talking about the figures, but you are a social scientist. So if you want to bring in a theoretical perspective, I think there is an opportunity to talk about the differences between fascism as an ideology and how it operates and dictatorship. So how do you view... So in Bangladesh, we have had dictatorships before. Zia Rahman, then Ershad, and we also had dictatorial tendencies even among democratic leaders. Many would say that Khaleda Zia was perhaps trying to be like Sheikh Hasina, but she couldn't get over the line. And we also have seen dictatorial tendencies in Sheikh Hasina version 1996. But do you think that it is possible to say that Awami League is objectively bad, especially in the recently passed version of it, in the sense that it has been a fascist party rather than just simply being an autocratic party?
Well, in that case, I would first I'd like to clarify one thing, is that the past regime was not just Awami League alone as a political party. It was it was able to become the Awami League that we saw in past say 16 years or like 10 years or 5 years, precisely because a good number of people, particularly from the cultural space, the cultural elites, majority of them or most influential players in cultural scene, they actually were co-opted or willing to be part of the regime. So what they did, like you asked about difference between dictatorial regime and fascist regime. In dictatorial regime, everyone knows, everyone understands and realize that they have to abide by, they have to endure the suppression and dictatorial role, because there is power behind it. If they don't agree, if they don't go by, there will be repercussion, there will be physical violence, there will be plundering, there will be dispossession by force. But in fascist regime, people actually think it is good. They give consent, because that consent is manufactured at discursive level through certain dominant narratives, or making certain narratives dominant. For example, all these plunderers, including the past, including the fallen Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, they would come up with a justification for whatever they did and they would do in the name of মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেতনা, without ever telling what is মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেতনা.
Whatever they do is মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেতনা.
Whatever they, so because they purposively would not clarify what they mean by মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেতনা, because they would use it as a justification for whatever they do and whatever they did. And the culture industry, the entire culture industry was deployed to make people accept anything in the name of মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেতনা, right? So even though it was more brutal, it was more corrupt, it was more morally unsupportable regime compared to any of the dictatorial regimes we had before, still a good number of people would not criticize it, would not raise their critical voice, or even if they would hear someone else criticizing this regime, would tell them not to do so, because the regime itself was believed to be the upholder of মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেতনা.
So here we're seeing a different dynamic in play. So Awami League as a party, it is ruling and ruling very badly, as you have described. But there is also a segment of population behind it. So fascism, by definition, is an ideology that is subscribed to and upheld by a segment of population. So whatever they did, it's not simply the work of one party or one individual. And there is the leftover, the people. Not everyone could flee to India, and it's not possible both realistically and perhaps even morally to talk about the deportation of these millions of people. So how do we deal with this problem? How do we solve this dilemma? Are we talking about denazification as we have seen in Europe? And there are dilemmas about denazification because that can turn into another fascism version 2, in the name of fighting fascism. The second part that I would like to ask you is, currently, the problem that we see is not about Hasina or Awami League being there in Bangladesh, but what would the political future of Bangladesh look like in the absence of Hasina, in the absence of Awami League?
Okay, so you are asking some very broad questions which need some more time to respond. So let me answer the first one. So we were asked this question only like few days ago. I was doing this interview with another outlet. So me, two other writers, Farhan Abdul Salam and Zia Hassan, and we were asked, how do you define the regime that Hasina ran? All three of us, particularly one of the authors, Farhan Bhai, he was vehement that it was not fascism, because fascists will go and file a complaint if you ask Hasina's regime to be a fascist regime. And it's a nuance, because in Bangla we just call them fascists. Fascism is actually more honorable than what Hasina was. Okay, so it's a very important distinction. Mussolini would be very upset if he were to hear that this petty thug from Tungipara is a fascist. So that's number one. So how do I then define what these people were? So my response to that question was, and the same for you, would be, Hasina's regime was basically a cult of thugs and thieves. It's basically a thugs and thieves, like a bandit party, like a party of marauding bandits who came from some corner of Bangladesh, in this case, which is Tungipara, and then they became a thug and thieves party, which engulfed the overall population, not with any ideology. The Awami League of today doesn't have any ideology. They can deal with anybody. They can take anybody as their friend. In fact, by the time this whole thing collapsed and everybody fled, the party became a party of tokais. Like if you look at their processions, there are not very many bright people running around with, like Ramdas and Chapatis defending Awami League. Okay, there were not even like a graduate students there on their processions anymore. Just look at the video footages, like their tail end of their, even like on 15th when they tried to manufacture like these big processions. These are all hired tokais. Okay, so this party became completely devoid of any ideology in the end. That's how they collapsed, actually. Like all the people of any ideology left them. It was left with just thieves and thugs. So that's very important. And then there are other stuff like this idea about Chetona and everything. We know how much of a fraudulent idea that was. But yes, you are right. At some point, Awami League, during maybe 2010s, they were still operating with this Chetona idea, like what they're talking about. The Chetona being, like a supreme ideology, everybody has to subscribe to their ideology. That is true. And then this whole divide between with liberation, against liberation, for liberation, against liberation, that is also another ideological divide that they exploited. But in the end, it was and it has always been a party of thieves and thugs all the way going back to her father's time. And you also need to understand who the father was. We need to question that, right? Who the father was. If you look at his upbringing, his rise to the top, his friends, you can track those people, like the people who actually fought with him and then they had longer lives than him. They became ministers. I'm not naming them, but you know who those people are, all those 4 caliphas and all of those were thieves and thugs. And their history will tell you these are thieves and thugs. They are not ideological people. Okay? So that's that. So it's not a fascist party. It's a marauding bandits which got enough strength to engulf the people. Behind the scene, they are also a cult, right? They're a cult.
Yes.
And then the cultism comes from various different things. It would take more time to explain what the cult is, but accept them as a cult. And like any other cult, they are not going away, right? So going back to your question, what to do with them now that their leaders have fled? What do I do with the rest of the cult or the believers of the cult? You don't deal with them in any more vigor and ruthlessness than just using your regular rule of law. For example, these are all petty thieves and big thieves and thugs. So they are basically doing stealing and killing. So just use the regular law, take video footages, find their video footages, send them to jail, trace their money trail, send them to jail. And those are the big ones. And then the smaller ones, they just get to leave. I mean, they just give them amnesty, do transparent, like legal trials of the killers and the thieves. The rest of the Awami Leaguers who believe in their father, cry about him, they will be there. Let them cry and be sorrow and have sorrow and sadness on 15th August. That doesn't hurt anybody, right?
So what?
I would like to. I totally agree with what you have just said, but I want to add something to it because what you were describing is the mature form of this cult and this group of thugs, right? But it has a beginning. It had a beginning, and that's where actually I want to emphasize. That beginning is the belief that there is a Sheikh Hasina's father was the father of the nation, was Bangabandhu, and
not
was
my
loved
father.
by everyone. that has to
You're
be,
not part of a nation.
that has to be and you also said that they didn't actually have Awami League didn't actually have an ideology.
Yeah,
that is true, but people
in the
believe in the end.
end,
But
yeah.
people believe that they have an ideology, and that ideology aligns with what we know as the Mukti Juddher Chetona. We actually need to debunk that. We need to first, by how we would do it, we need to test it against actual facts. Our independence happened just like 7 decades, like 71. How many years?
5 decades.
5 decades. So there are still people living like like thousands of people are living who experienced 71 in their adulthood, right? They can give you testimony. There are papers, there are books, there are academic articles about it. So we need to explore those and expose the so-called Muktijuddher Chetona to actually demonstrate. I have been reading some of those, and I know that what Faham says, it's a scam. 71 appears to be almost like a scam. I'm not yet claiming that, but what I am asking is that we have to explore what actually happened in 71 and who did what and who are to be attributed how much of the credit, if it was credit worthy,
And also
right?
how much blame should be.
I wouldn't say blame, but responsibility.
Yep.
A lot of things happened immediately after 71. Who is to be given that responsibility, right?
Yes.
For example, there was a huge famine in 74. Who is to take that responsibility of whatever caused that famine that killed more than 400,000 of people and devastated the entire country? Then who are to be hold responsible for not being able to or failing to or purposively destroying the institutions in the newly independent country? All these things have to be taken in the broad daylight, in discussions, in public narratives, to help people understand that the entire ideology of Muktijuddher Chetona, on which Awami League actually started, to come back and possibly will come back again if that is to be kept or left intact.
Yes, and just going back to this whole concept of Muktijuddher Chetona. So I am in my mid 40s. So I grew up during the 80s and the 90s. This whole word didn't exist back then. I mean, Hasan bhai, similar age profile as mine. So this whole word did not exist. For younger people like you should know this. So, and this is the biggest scam, as brother was saying. I can tell you, I heard that word for the first time, probably somewhere around 90s, late 90s or maybe mid 90s to be, or maybe early 90s. But it was a 1990s invention. So my father was tortured brutally by the Pakistani army. His account is written in book format. My wife lost 3 of her own uncles, like literal uncles, like my father-in-law's own brothers. One of them fought for the East Pakistan military. So this whole word, the Muktijuddher Chetona, is not even known to them before that time, right? So this was a scam that was sold by people, basically a class of people, and I have a theory on that, and Hasan bhai is more educated than me on this kind of stuff. But I have a theory. The theory is, during the 1980s and the 70s, the Soviets used to nurture a big industry in Bangladesh of writers and columnists. They were literally living off of the Soviet largesse. Like Soviet Union used to publish all kinds of pamphlets, books, articles, and there was an ecosystem of like patronage system of writing and thinking folks in various parts of the world and in Bangladesh. 89, Soviet Union collapsed. That money dried up. That same class of people literally became unemployed. And that was also the time when the privatization happened in Bangladesh. So all these media houses were created. So somehow those old Soviet folks, like Motiur Rahmans of today, these guys found employment in the corporate sector, which is Prothom Alos of the world and all that. And then they translated their enthusiasm for USSR into something new. And then what else could that be? That was basically this Muktijuddher Chetona business. And the beauty of that industry was they were lucky that within 10 years there was 9/11.
Yeah.
So then they rode the war and terror bandwagon. And then they made every person with a beard a anti-Muktijuddher Chetona, which is basically synonym for war and terror, basically a terrorist. So this whole industry, war and terror, former Soviet people, and then this whole Mukti Juddha Chetona industry became one. And the foundation of this theory that I'm trying to create is because if you look at the players, that profile is there. Shahriar Kabir, all these people had either Chhatra Union or like some other communist background and spewing out hatred about basically the larger, more religious population. These are all not very religious people. It just goes on and on. But that is the genesis of this whole Mukti Juddha Chetona industry and the economics of it. Okay? So then that was sold to you guys by people like Jafar Iqbal, another fraud, like all these people, right? And then Awami League was the political force behind this thing. And by the time corporatization and industrialization went into massive thuggery and plunder, all these media houses were actually not doing media business anymore. They were just being mouthpiece of thieves and thugs. So that's the 3-decade history of this Mukti Juddha Chetona, how these things survived. Now it all collapsed, and I do not foresee any possibility of that ideology to get a new leg, at least not in next 10 years. Sorry for the long answer.
No, so what you have just described is, I think, very hard to disagree with. But I think there is a difference of opinion on the fact or on the question of whether this Mukti Juddha Chetona industry can come back in the future in Bangladesh. So Hasan Bhai says it's possible that if it is not debunked to the extent that it should be debunked, then it will make a comeback. And you were saying that you are not very hopeful about it.
Let me defend why I'm not very hopeful. Of course, we need to debunk it. So don't get me wrong. In fact, the whole theory that I explained is an attempt to debunk it. And there will be more attempts in the future. So that's not the point. We will debunk it. But why I'm not hopeful about this snake oil that was sold to rebrand itself, which is Mukti Juddha Chetona, is because conceptual hatred for something is one thing, and a lived experience about something is a different thing. So this time around, all the young people who were on the streets, they were shot at by indiscriminate shooting by the police, indiscriminate hacking and beating by Chhatra League. And that's the population of the age profile from maybe 15 years to 25 years. Mm-hmm. The entire country, not even like just Dhaka University, which used to be the history of all political movements in Bangladesh in the past. Everything was just Dhaka University based. This time around, it was broad-based. Every school, every college participated. And these are young people. These people will be the voters for next 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, right? So it's no longer conceptual for these people. They saw what that Chetona is, which is basically indiscriminate shooting at them. So if you ever run for your life, ever, even from a dog, you will hate a dog. If a cat chases you, you'll be hating cats for the rest of your life. You were chased by live bullets for like last many weeks, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think this lived experience can ever be surmounted by some snake oil, which is Mukti Juddha Chetona.
But this also presents us with a different set of dilemma. So if this narrative comes crashing down, which Shafquat Rabbee says has already come crash down, and Awami League as a party is no longer there, how do we run a political system? To run a political system, most stable democracies have a two-party system. In the US, we have a two-party system. In the UK, I'm struggling to find an example in which there is not a two-party system in a democracy. So, and there is a worry. A lot of people think, very well-meaning people even, that there should be some time given to Awami League to reorganize itself just to ensure that what is speculated is a BNP will become the next government. It will form the next government. So it doesn't become another Awami League.
No, I get it. So your question is, what will happen to the people who supported Awami League,
Yeah.
whether there would be a party named Awami League at all, and whether there would be enough political parties to contest, right? Basically, these are the few things you are worried about.
Yeah.
The main point here is Awami League will be around, right? Awami League people who act like a cult, there's a big proportion of minority people who vote for them. They are not going anywhere. So Awami League will be around. But Awami League will find other ways to do politics. Because in a country, just think about it, it's 52 years from 53 years from the historical thing that they did politics on. Everything has a shelf life. So the kids who are 25, 15 years, why would they even care about 50-year-old events? So naturally, this thing would have died at some point anyway, okay? So right now, because of Hasina's mistakes, the whole Chetona business is probably going to be gone. But that doesn't mean there is not going to be opposition business, right? No government will be able to run this country, with lot of prosperity. It's a difficult country to govern. There would be a lot of issues. There could be, fundamentalism. There could be whatever. There would be many different things that our Leaguers will be able to find and exploit and extend their political future. Okay, so that's not an issue. Chetonar business is gone. Like anybody who I think, and I hope I'll be proven right, because by the way, I'm one of the people who started busting Chetona 25 years ago. In fact, I am one of the few legendary people, now I'm not bragging, who created language, words, and busting Chetona for 25 years. And I think hopefully I'll be proven right that anybody in the future uttering Chetona business words, like the words that they used to use, they will be slapped on the public forums. Okay, hopefully. If that's not the case, I'm okay with it. But maybe, different forms of slap would be there. Chetonar Babsha is gone.
But some
I want to add something with this. So Chetona Babsha is gone, but his question perhaps was also like, then what?
Yes.
Post Chetona, then what? I would tell you that we should aspire for real, like, workable democracy, which means which requires a lot of re-socialization, a lot of learning. And because I believe that since independence, Bangladeshis did not have an opportunity to test what democracy looks like, feels like, and how democracy works, because we have been taught into believing that we have to go by certain ideologies, certain ideologues, certain leader. Wholeheartedly, we are to believe and we are to follow them blindly. That is not what democracy is, and democracy cannot work in that way. Democracy requires self-conscious individuals. If it is to be democracy, we have to be aware about our rights and responsibilities, and we have to submit to the original liberal idea of a state as a collection of people, collectivity based on the basis of their self-interest. If the state provides me certain rights, protects and delivers my rights, will get my obedience, will get my support. There is no other things in between, right? So if that happens, if that is to happen, we need to teach people that we do not need a tribe where everyone follows the leader. Rather, we need self-conscious people who are aware about their rights on one hand and their responsibility on the other, and they come together based on their interests as individuals, as members of certain groups, and at the end as a citizen of Bangladesh.
So is it your suggestion that we move away from what can be called identity politics?
Of course.
So do you think it's possible? Gramsci talked about, some lingering problems that do not get the organic crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So for the past 15 years, there has been a divide along the lines of Chetona and what Chetona is not, also secularism, anti-secularism. So they basically correspond to each other. So do you think it's possible to move beyond that?
Look, theoretically speaking, when you recognize or when you are able to recognize with certain level of confidence that there is a problem, it's almost already halfway towards the solution.
Okay.
you can recognize a problem, certainly, right? But you cannot be certain about one single solution to that problem. To arrive at a solution, a workable solution, and an agreeable solution, you have to present facts to back up your opinion. You have to come up with agreeable, persuasive reasoning behind the kind of conclusions you are presenting on the discussion table. But the baseline is that it has to be through dialogues, and in which everyone's voice is accommodated. It's not that, okay, you are a PhD, so your voice should overrule everyone else. No. In a democracy, everyone has one vote, so everyone's voice has to be accommodated. But those mechanisms are not in Bangladesh. Either they were not ever developed, or if there were a few mechanisms, those have been already destroyed. So, that's what I'm saying.
But how do you respond to the claim or to the criticism that will go along this line that if majority gets its way, so majority have its way, then we will be seeing the rise of many ugly things, including fundamentalism perhaps, or other problems.
So what you think, what we call fundamentalism is certain kinds of ideologies where people do not act on the basis of their interest, but their adherence and alliance with certain ideologies. Just take, for an example, like establishing Khilafat. Why would you need Khilafat? Because you believe that is the best way of ruling a country or a nation, right? That's just your belief. Can you justify it? Most likely not. If it is not justifiable in the dialogue, then there is no point in trying to take that route. But it will definitely take time. As I said, most people in Bangladesh have not been taught these kinds of ideas, because liberalism is almost like a slang, almost like a bad word in every way possible to a certain group of people. On the other hand, other people think Islamism a very deplorable thing because of a number of reasons, right? These are not like facts. Islamism has goods and bad properties as well as limitations. So does liberalism. We need to actually understand what those really mean.
And have like an effective democratic way to settle those questions, okay? So I think we're towards the end of the discussion. I just want to conclude saying a few things. Number one, which way to run the country has to be decided by the people. We did not have a mechanism for that for the longest period of time. Like people of your age, people of slightly older, younger than you, never seen proper elections. Okay, so we have to have that back. We have to have these grand questions solved through people's mandate.
Yeah.
If people really want Khilafat, maybe Bangladesh will have Khilafat. I don't know that. I would not.
That will frighten a lot of people.
Of course, and I would not be happy if that were to be the case, because that would be bad for many people. But the thing is, it's up to them. My view is it should be up to the people to decide how they want to live. Now, going back to your question about majoritarianism. Majoritarianism is a dangerous thing, which means you have dispelled Awami League from the streets. Now you have anti-Awami League forces running the country, hopefully, not right now, but at some point. And then you just do a steamroller on Awami people. That would be wrong, number one. Or you embolden lunatics from the extreme right. That would be wrong, right? But the thing is, who am I to say if it's right or wrong? You need a construct
Absolutely.
and a framework for it. You already have a constitution. Bangladesh has a constitution. The constitution has, protections for minorities. Bangladesh has laws that protect minorities. Minorities, not just religious minority. All types of minorities should get protection from the state. If there is something that's still not there, like protection of the weak, that is actually the purpose of the state. The state's job is to protect the weak, because the strong doesn't need any protection. He's already strong. So fundamentally, we have a constitution. we just didn't have two other elements that make a good society. One is rule of law, which means an effective court, appellate division to enforce the constitution. That was missing for the longest time. And the other thing that is missing is change of leadership when people do not like the way the country is going, right? Which is elections or some other way of doing that. But election is the most appropriate way of doing it. So we have laws, we have constitution, we need to enforce it through the courts and change direction of the country through elections. It's pretty simple, basic stuff. This is not rocket science. There are hundreds of countries who do these things pretty well, right? So in Bangladesh, the narrative that I do not like is everybody thinks about a scheme. The scheme is, if this happens, Aumali is going to come. If that happens, BNP is going to come. Why do you care who comes? Why cannot you trust a system and have the confidence that, yes, Aumali can come? And then they have to go if they are not good enough. Similarly, Jamaat can come, BNP can come to power, and if they are not good, I will kick them out.
Mm-hmm.
This normalcy of politics, the basics of politics, has to be brought back to the country. Absent this thing, which has been quite long right now, about 16, 17 years, and actually even more than that, we are stuck with these schemes.
Yeah.
We got to stop these schemes.
I think that is a wonderful note to end on. Thanks for joining, both of you. We really had an interesting conversation on a number of issues, and thankfully we also disagreed on a few issues as well as on what we agreed. So here we conclude.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.